Under the moon and the quiet sky so clear, a whisper of hope is all I hold near. Every breath, every word, a humble call, guided by mercy, the one above all.
He was the kind one, the one who forgave first, who listened more than he spoke, who chose peace even when every nerve in his body screamed for justice. He held doors open. He remembered birthdays. He apologized even when it wasn't his fault, especially when it wasn't his fault. People said he had a good heart. But no one ever asked what that heart looked like after it was broken for the 100th time.
That shines so pure, guide me always, your love is sure. No riches I see, no crown to wear, just your mercy forever, everywhere. In the stillness where the silence stays, I find my solace in whispered praise. From the sunrise to the starlit dawn, in your grace I found my home. When my voice shakes and my fears ignite, you calm the storm with warm, pure light. In the echoes of faith, I find my song. With you, I'll stand forever strong.
What happens to that kind of person? Not the obviously wicked, not the manipulator or the narcissist, but the soft-spoken, well-meaning soul who kept choosing grace in a graceless world. What happens when the world keeps punishing kindness? Again and again and again. He doesn't explode. He doesn't scream. He changes quietly, irreversibly. You've seen this before. Maybe you've been this before. The friend who used to call just to check in suddenly goes silent. The woman who once offered love like sunlight now wraps it in barbed wire. The man who used to cry during movies now doesn't flinch when hurting others. People say things like, "He's different now," but what they really mean is, "He's stopped pretending." What if the darkness didn't enter him? What if it was always there, waiting patiently beneath the surface of his goodness? What if it was mercy, not rage, that needed effort? What if being kind was a performance and the mask has finally slipped? There's a terrifying question we never ask. What if evil doesn't begin with cruelty, but with exhaustion? The exhaustion of being good in a world that rewards the ruthless. The fatigue of setting boundaries that no one respects. The slow death of giving too much, for too long, to people who never deserved it. We like to believe that evil is a separate category, that there are good people and there are bad people, and you simply fall into one or the other, like you do zodiac signs. But reality isn't so simple. People don't wake up and decide to become monsters. They erode, their empathy chipped away by betrayals, their patience corroded by humiliation, their warmth swallowed by indifference. Evil is not an identity, it's an evolution, and that evolution often begins inside the best of us. Not because we want power, not because we love destruction, But because we're tired of losing when goodness becomes painful, people stop choosing it. They become strategic, cold, calculated, not because they've lost their soul, but because they've learned the rules. And in this world, kindness without power is a liability, so we adapt. We grow armor. We laugh less. We trust less. We become what we once feared, not out of desire, but out of necessity. And yet, the world calls it evil. But here's the paradox. Sometimes, what looks like evil is just goodness pushed past its breaking point. A child ignored too long becomes an adult who no longer cares. A lover betrayed too often becomes a partner who plays games first. A citizen lied to for years becomes the kind of person who stops believing in anything. And the scariest part, they don't even notice the moment they change. No dramatic fall, no flick of a switch, just a quiet resignation. So ask yourself, when someone you loved became cold, did they truly become cruel? Or did they simply stop pretending that being good was working? Maybe the real question isn't, why do good people turn into monsters? Maybe it's, what does it cost to stay good in a world that doesn't value goodness, and who can actually afford to pay that cost forever? Because if goodness is only possible when it's easy, is it really goodness at all? Or is it just the temporary luxury of those who've never had to bleed for it? The world doesn't punish evil. It punishes vulnerability. This is the first lie we're taught. Be good, and good things will happen. But the child who shares his toy gets it taken. The student who stays silent gets overlooked. The lover who gives everything is left hollow. Somewhere early on, we learn being good doesn't mean being safe, it means being exposed. So weird. But But the real shift begins much earlier than we realize, not in action, but in thought. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the part of the psyche we exile, the anger we suppress, the desire we deny, the violence we pretend isn't there. We wear masks of virtue, not out of malicious intent, but out of survival. Because society only rewards a certain image of goodness, polished, obedient, unthreatening. And everything else? We bury it. But nothing buried stays buried forever. The more we deny the shadow, the more it hungers. It begins to twist our morality into something rigid and fragile. We become good for the sake of appearances, of approval, of safety not, out of alignment with who we truly are. And in doing so, we become disconnected from the very soul of goodness, conscious choice. Friedrich Nietzsche warned of this in Beyond Good and Evil. He who fights with monsters should be careful lest he thereby become a monster. But what if you never meant to fight monsters? What if you were just trying to stay soft in a world that only respects sharp edges? The real problem isn't that good people become evil. The problem is we define good so poorly. We confuse goodness with compliance. We confuse compassion with self-erasure. We confuse forgiveness with martyrdom. So when someone finally says no, we call them cold. When someone stops giving, we call them bitter. When someone stops sacrificing, we call them selfish. But maybe they're not breaking down. Maybe they're waking up. Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, believed that suffering without meaning leads to despair. When a person gives endlessly, loves endlessly, forgives endlessly, and sees no transformation in return, they begin to question the point of their sacrifice. This is where bitterness grows, not from hatred, but from meaningless pain. Bitterness is not the absence of love. It is love that has seen too much and cannot unsee it. Modern psychology confirms this. Unprocessed betrayal doesn't disappear, it metastasizes. People who chronically suppress resentment, rage, or grief in the name of being good experience elevated rates of anxiety, emotional numbness, and even psychosomatic illness. The mind finds ways to express what the mouth cannot say. We are not moral creatures by default. We are adaptive. We learn from pain. And when kindness brings more suffering than cruelty, the nervous system takes note. It starts to encode a different lesson. Vulnerability equals danger. Empathy equals weakness. Trust equals stupidity. Over time, a person stops trying to be good and starts trying to be invulnerable. Not because they hate others, but because they can no longer afford the risk of being hurt again. This is not evil. This is survival. But survival, unchecked, becomes dangerous. Because it asks only one question: what keeps me safe? And never asks, what keeps me human? Jean-Paul Sartre once wrote, "Hell is other people, but perhaps the true hell is becoming someone you don't recognize because other people taught you that being yourself was a liability." And so, the transformation continues. First, it's small. You start withholding. You calculate your kindness. You give only when it benefits you. You stop expecting reciprocation. Then, slowly, you start taking. You start controlling. You start shaping your world with sharper hands, not out of malice, but out of muscle memory. This is how pain rewires morality. And here lies the central contradiction. Most evil isn't born out of hate, it's born out of love. That was twisted. A desire to be safe, a desire to be seen, a desire to matter. The tyrant was once a child begging to be heard. The manipulator was once a teenager betrayed one too many times. The abuser was once someone who cried out for help and was mocked for it. But their transformation doesn't excuse their behavior. It explains it. And that explanation holds the key to something deeper. If we can understand how goodness becomes corrupted, we can stop pretending evil is some foreign force. We can recognize it in seed form inside ourselves, because it's not just them, it's you too. That flash of contempt, that fantasy of revenge, that moment where you stop feeling anything at all. You tell yourself it's just a phase. But what if it's not? What if it's the beginning, not of madness? What of forgetting that you once believed in something softer, something purer, something that didn't need armor to survive? The scariest part about losing your goodness is that you don't hear it leave. There's no siren, no thunderclap, no sudden crisis that signals the moment you crossed a line. It's quieter than that, more elegant. It shows up in how you look at people, in the tone you take when someone apologizes, in the silence you offer instead of comfort. You are still polite, still composed, still you but slightly altered, like a familiar room where the furniture has been rearranged just enough to make you feel unsettled. This is how transformation hides, in familiarity. The world doesn't immediately label you as changed. In fact, it applauds you. You're finally standing up for yourself. You've learned to stop caring so much. You've grown thicker skin. They don't see that beneath that thicker skin is a wounded soul that no longer believes healing is possible. And this is where the deepest consequence begins. You start believing that numbness is wisdom. You confuse detachment with maturity. You start interpreting your lack of empathy as a form of control. And the worst part, it works. You get hurt less. You're more efficient. You cut toxic people faster. You move through life like a blade, clean, sharp, untouchable. But in becoming untouchable, you become unreachable. This is the silent epidemic. People who no longer know how to feel deeply because their pain taught them that feeling deeply was dangerous. What looks like confidence is often just well-managed despair. What looks like strength is often just unprocessed grief in disguise. Psychologically, this is known as emotional numbing. It's not a sign of healing, it's a defense mechanism. The brain, overwhelmed by repeated betrayal, humiliation, or disappointment, begins to shut down the systems responsible for joy, hope, and compassion because those systems make you vulnerable. But here's the cost. When you shut down the parts of you that can be hurt, you also shut down the parts that can truly love. And now, your relationships suffer, not because you're mean, but because you're absent, present in body, missing in soul. This absence is contagious. Children raised by emotionally unavailable parents grow up questioning whether they're lovable. Partners begin to wonder if they're talking to a person or a fortress. Friends stop reaching out, not Because they don't care, but because they can sense you've retreated somewhere unreachable. And this damage spreads quietly, generationally. A man who was once tender learns to weaponize silence. A woman who was once forgiving now treats every kindness as a transaction. Entire communities begin to build their culture around suspicion rather than trust. This is how monsters are born, not out of fire, but out of frost. We often imagine evil as loud and aggressive, but the most dangerous kind of evil is subtle. It looks like resignation. It feels like fatigue. It operates not through malice but through the absence of resistance. You stop fighting for goodness not because you've chosen evil, but because you've stopped believing goodness is worth the fight. And society rewards you for this. Corporations love emotionally detached workers. Governments prefer citizens too burnt out to resist. Social media platforms thrive on outrage, not empathy. The modern world profits from your numbness because numb people buy more, obey more, and question less. Arthur Schopenhauer once wrote, "Compassion is the basis of morality." But if your compassion has withered, what's left to guide you? What replaces morality when we no longer feel? The answer is calculation. You begin to treat people like equations. What do they offer me? What do I lose by helping them? You help only when it benefits you. You love only when it's safe. You live with one foot always out the door, ready to disappear if anyone gets too close. This is not evil in the traditional sense, but it is the breeding ground for cruelty. Because cruelty often begins not with hatred, but with indifference. And here lies the real danger. The monster you feared becoming isn't loud or violent. He's efficient, strategic, emotionally invulnerable. He doesn't hate you. He simply doesn't care. And that indifference is worse than hate because it can't be reasoned with. It can't be healed. It simply exists, silent, absolute. When this spreads, we don't just lose individual goodness, we lose the collective soul of society. We normalize the unkind. We reward the detached. We elect the heartless. We admire the ones who never flinch. We begin to mistake cruelty for strength and apathy for intelligence. And worst of all, we begin to forget what goodness ever felt like. We start to believe it was never real to begin with. Just a phase, a dream, a weakness we outgrew. But what if that softness, the very thing you buried, was your last link to what made you human? What if the monster isn't some distant other, but simply who you become? When you forget that your heart was once alive, somewhere inside you, the war never ended. There's the version of you that still wants to believe, still aches to love, to care, to trust. And then there's the version that was forged in fire, sharp, watchful, prepared to strike before being struck. These two selves don't hate each other, but they don't speak anymore. One lives in memory, the other controls your life. But rebellion begins in that silence. Not the kind of rebellion the world celebrates, not rage, not revenge, not recklessness. No, the rebellion we're talking about is quieter, stranger, riskier. It starts when you ask a dangerous question. What if I don't want to live like this anymore? What if numbness isn't strength? What if invulnerability is just a beautiful prison? What if healing means risking pain again? This is the moment where the old you whispers, "I'm still here." But breaking free isn't about becoming nice. Again, it's not about moral performance. It's not about people-pleasing or self-sacrifice. That's the trap you already escaped. Breaking free means something far more radical. It means learning to feel again and refusing to apologize for it. The philosopher Aldous Huxley once wrote, "Experience is not what happens to a man, it is what a man does with what happens to him." You were hurt. That was real. But what you do with that hurt, that's your rebellion. And you begin with this. You stop mistaking numbness for wisdom. You stop pretending detachment is maturity. You stop using coldness as a shield against disappointment. Instead, you build something else. A morality not based on approval, but on integrity. A love not given recklessly, but intentionally. A strength that feels everything and acts anyway. This is the difference between the monster and the rebel. The monster protects himself by disconnecting. The rebel protects his soul by returning to it. You begin to engage with your shadow, not suppress it. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." You meet the parts of you that want to manipulate, to lash out, to dominate, and instead of unleashing them or denying them, you understand them. You ask, "What do you want?" And the answer is never power. It's always safety, recognition, peace. Once you realize that, the war begins to end. The darkness inside you wasn't trying to destroy your life. It was trying to save it with the only tools it had. But now, you can choose different tools. Empathy, not naivety. Boundaries, not walls. Forgiveness, not forgetfulness. And that forgiveness must include yourself. You forgive the version of you that chose cruelty when you didn't know better. You forgive the moments where your heart froze to survive. You forgive yourself not because you were right, but because you were human. That's how the cycle begins to break. Because here's the truth no one tells you. You can be good and powerful. You can be kind and fierce. You can be soft without being broken. This is not the old kind of goodness, the brittle kind that relies on people liking you. This is a goodness forged in self-knowledge, scarred and sharpened by everything you've endured. It does not need applause. It needs only to be lived. But make no mistake, this path is difficult. It will feel unnatural to open again. You will want to retreat. You will feel the tremble in your voice when you speak truth. After years of silence, you will cry in places you once only said. But that trembling, that breaking voice, that's not weakness. That's your soul thawing. And slowly, something changes. The walls you built begin to breathe. The numbness gives way to color. The cold mask starts to crack, and beneath it, you find a face that was waiting to return. You're not going back to who you were. That person is gone. You're becoming someone new. Someone who has seen the monster inside them and refused to become it. That is rebellion. To choose love not because it's easy, but because it's true. To feel, even when it hurts. To care, even when the world doesn't. You are not soft because you are naive. You are soft because you are strong enough to let life touch you again. And that kind of strength, it doesn't dominate. It doesn't manipulate. It doesn't seek revenge. It simply exists, unapologetic, grounded, awake. You are no longer living. In reaction to pain, you are choosing, and that choice makes you free. You've spent your life trying not to become the monster. You gave more than you had. You forgave when it cost you everything. You carried the weight of other people's chaos, hoping that somehow your goodness would be enough to save them and save you. But it didn't. Not always, not often. And when it didn't, you started to wonder if all that effort, all that love, had ever mattered. Here's the ultimate truth. You were never fighting evil in others. You were fighting the invitation to become like them. That's what darkness wants. Not your pain, not your suffering, your imitation. It wants you to believe that empathy is foolish, that trust is weakness, that love is a lie. Because once you believe that, once you abandon your ability to feel, you stop being a threat to the system that feeds on fear. But here's the revelation. You don't defeat the monster by killing it. You defeat the monster by refusing to become it. The monster survives by convincing you that becoming heartless is the only way to survive. It whispers, if you care, you'll be destroyed. It tempts you with the illusion of safety, detachment, dominance, control. But none of these things are safety. They are only distance from yourself. Real safety is found in integrity, not perfection, not sainthood. Just the willingness to live in alignment with who you are, even when the world tries to convince you otherwise. And who are you? You are the person who kept loving after loss, the one who still reached out when no one reached back, the one who felt too much, too deeply, and lived anyway. The pain didn't ruin you. It revealed you. It showed you that your heart may be wounded, but it is not broken, that your soul may be scarred, but it is still sacred. That your story isn't about how you suffered, but how you stayed soft in a world that tried to turn you hard. This is the greatest victory, not to escape darkness, but to walk through it and come out still able to feel the sun. Yes, you changed. No, you'll never be innocent again, but you're something more rare than innocence now. You are conscious. You know what it costs to be kind. You know how heavy love can be. You know the risks of vulnerability, and you still choose it. That choice, that's power. Not power over others, but power over yourself. And this is what the world needs. Not more good people who pretend not to feel rage, but awake people who know the full weight of their shadow and choose to live in the light anyway. This kind of person is unshakable, not because they are fearless, but because they've made peace with their fear. Not because they are untouchable, but because they have nothing to hide. Not because they're immune to becoming a monster, but because they've faced their inner monster and offered it compassion instead of denial. In doing so, they transformed it. This is the forgotten truth that no one teaches. The monster isn't there to be destroyed. It's there to be understood. And once it is understood, it no longer controls you. It becomes part of you, integrated, humbled, no longer exiled in the dark corners of your mind. Carl Jung said it best. The gold is in the dark. Your anger has wisdom. Your bitterness has truth. Your pain has a message. But only if you stop running from it. Only if you stop pretending you are pure. You are not pure. You are whole. You are a mixture of compassion and cruelty, longing and pride, light and shadow. And in that wholeness lies your redemption. So no, you are not a monster. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are a human being in a brutal world learning how to feel without being destroyed by it. And maybe that's what true goodness really is. Not blind selflessness, not moral superiority, but the decision to keep your heart open even when every part of you wants to shut it down. That is the revolution, not to escape pain, but to feel it and stay open anyway. To look at a world that's taught you to harden and soften instead. To stop asking, how can I be good? And start asking, how can I be real? Because realness is where the healing begins. And in a world full of masks, performance, and disconnection, realness is the most dangerous and holy thing you can offer. So here you are, no longer running, no longer pretending, fully awake. You've seen the shadow, you've seen the monster, you've seen yourself. And now you know the difference. The next time you feel the old numbness return, the next time you're tempted to close off, strike back, or disappear, don't ask, how do I protect myself? Ask instead, what would love do if it had lived through everything I've lived through? Then do that, not because it's easy, but because it's true. And maybe, just maybe, that truth will save someone else, too. Someone watching you, someone on the edge, someone just starting to forget who they are. So stay soft, stay dangerous, stay human.